full hour of football talk starts right now with Mike Detillier, SaintsReport.com, MikeDetillier.com, Saints News Network, part of the SI Network, and, of course, the M&D Draft Report. Mike D., how are you, man?
I'm doing good. Thank you, Matt.
Always our pleasure, Mike. Let's go to Sean Payton's kind of foot-in-the-mouth thing the other day on Get Up, saying it was Drew Brees' last year. He tried to walk it back. I know you and I talked about this a little bit ago about Drew at the Pro Bowl this year. What did you make of that? Was that a casual slip, or do you think that Sean kind of mistakenly let the cat out of the bag?
Well, the cat has long been out the bag. He just confirmed it.
Okay.
I mean, come on. I think what he's saying, and I've been in other businesses, Matt, and when people start to talk about retirement, the end is near. That's just the case. Mm-hmm. Anybody who's been around people as they're nearing retirement and they start to talk about it more and more, their mind's on retirement. And so, Sean sort of misspoke and maybe said it, but what he said, I think, is absolutely correct about what he said. And that, and listen, I'm not saying you can't change your mind because I've been around a few of those too. They say they're going to retire. I'm going to retire this year. And then, I'm going to try one more time. But I think once you start talking about it in that sort of context, I think you're down that road. So, it's a slow news day, other than the coronavirus stuff. And, that it sort of got picked up that way. But I think he's not breaking anybody any, this isn't a bulletin, so to speak, a special report. I think sort of all of us believe that this will be the last merry-go-round. It's not official from Drew, but I always think when somebody starts to talk about it and seriously considering it, and the fact that you can go in the booth and make a lot of money and not get hit by anything other than a paper clip or a piece of paper, and you got to think about it. So, but I get it because it was a slow news day and really sort of a distraction for us a little bit on there. And, and him, same thing with him drawing up plays.
That's so good, by the way.
My thing about it is, this is like if I would tell you, Matt, in the next 2 years, you know what, I'm going to buy a certain stock. It depends on when I buy it is when the value is. If I'm going to buy it at that day, then you might have something. Mm-hmm. But if you're not sure, then the value of that stock fluctuates quite a bit. Anybody who runs a stock market, does what I do sometimes and play around with it. Not play, a little bit more than what I do. I do more than a little play with it. But you understand that that's part of the game. And if I tell you ahead of time this is what we're going to run, you might be able to stop it. You might. All I remember is we had John Madden on. And this had to be about 4 or 5 years back on one of our Monday night shows. And John went on about, I was a rookie coach. And he said, I went here a seminar of Vince Lombardi about the power sweep. One play, 2 hours and 15 minutes. And he said, think about what the Packers did, running off that power sweep. Nothing really technical about it. It was all about execution. You knew it was coming, and you still couldn't stop it. Bill Walsh is, West Coast offense. That little short pass, Montana steps 2-3 step back, pow, it comes out of there. You knew it was coming, can't stop it. It's the execution of it. And man, I hear some of this. Oh man, he's giving away like secrets. What you figure? Come on, guys that do this all the time to break down film, they've seen that play hundreds of times. And if you knew it was coming, you have a better shot to stop it. But it's all about the execution of a play. So, yeah, Sean's made some nice little things the last couple of days with it, and sort of, the attention away from other things.
Gun, empty right, Quizno, 52 nudge, Ole, halfback choice.
Yep.
Got it, Mike. Nailed it. You know what was maybe more interesting of what Payton had to say was about the draft evaluations and how that might alter what they do on draft day. What was your reaction, or what did you make of what Sean was talking about there about how they might alter draft day?
I think what he has said is something similar to what I've said. I do think that players from the major colleges now have a leg up, much more so than in years past. that last month, you would look at maybe take a little harder look at a small college player. You'd maybe bring them in. One of the things the Saints do, along with other teams, is bring in a guy that's a borderline draft pick, 7th-round pick, 6th, 7th-round priority free agent. If you don't get picked, I got a relationship with you. You've come to my camp. You've seen what we got. You've got a relationship with the assistant coach. You can't do that anymore. Now, you can do it, over Skype or whatever, or Zoom, but, I mean, still it's different than being there and being at the place. I do think there's always a big question mark about players who maybe have a medical issue you want to check up on, and it's difficult to get medicals and medical information unless they release it to you. And secondly, character questions of something happened in their past to bring it back. I told you the story that happened with Arden Key. I go to film a deal for Channel 4 CBS, and I pull into the parking lot. We go to move. Arden pulls in right behind me. And so I start talking to him, and, he got stories, I got stories, and so it's all good. And so I told him, what's the deal? Oh, yeah. But yours are much more entertaining. Oh, yeah. And so I was like, how many times? He said, this is my third visit with the Saints. I said, your third visit? He said, my third one. And this was less than a week before the draft. And the Saints were still doing interviews. And, we finished the deal, and Arden told me that I have to catch a plane because I have another interview. I said, where you going? And he said, silver and black, baby. That's how he told it to me. And look where he ended up.
Yeah.
Look where he ended up. And so while he didn't convince the Saints that, everything was good and that they would have used an earlier round pick on him, he did make that. And, again, you're not winning the electoral college here. You're just looking for one. And the Raiders made that selection with Arden. But 3 times he visited with the Saints. 3. And one of them less than a week before the draft. So it does go to show you it does affect those type of things that happen. Now, I don't buy the argument that a lot of older coaches want to say that this draft's going to be better than other drafts because now you're going to pick off a film. And I tell them, really? I'm a little bit of a historian on this. Go back and look at those drafts of the 60s and 70s when they were held in late January and early February, and scouts and general managers did the picks, and not so much the head coaches. Look at the misses that they had there. It's as many or more as they've had today.
Mm-hmm.
So, it is all about, you going to the right team, right fit, that sort of situation. Sometimes injuries get involved. You don't know what happens to somebody once they get a little bit of money in their pocket for their work ethic. And sometimes you're just not good enough. You might have been a really good college player, but you're not a really good NFL player. And so there are a lot of variables in the draft. But I don't buy that. I did a show with Jerry Glanville. And, I told my coach, how many misses? And he said, well, that's a good point. He said, but, I never really had too many misses. I was like, really? Can I tell you that story about Brett Favre? Oh, that wasn't my fault. That was the GM. I wanted you. That's not the story the GM tells. But, again, Matt, I do think the perception is that we're going to do this all off of film. Doesn't make it that you're going to get better at it than the individual visits. Because, again, if you go back and look at some of those past drafts of the 60s and 70s, when they did it real early, they didn't have any better percentage hitting on that than what they do today. Matter of fact, it's worse.
We continue with Mike Detillier, inching closer to the draft. I've told you for 10 years now, don't you dare watch the draft if you're a draft nerd like me without your M&D draft report. You can go order it right now at MikeDetillier.com, MikeDetillier.com. Right there on the homepage, you'll see buy now. Tap that, you can buy it. And Mike, as I understand, you told me today, went to the printers?
Yes, it's at the printers, and it's a little delayed, naturally, for what's happening out there. And we'll get them back next week and ship them out right away. And normally, once we get them in a day, maybe 2 days. And so we're ready to roll. But like everybody else, man, it's we walking on ground we haven't walked on before. But it's at the printers, getting printed, and And like I said, hopefully we'll get him back sometime middle of next week.
Cover's gorgeous, Mike. We got it up on the screen right now.
How about that?
Normally you go green. This is a purple and gold cover with 2 LSU prospects featured with Joe Burrow and Justin Jefferson. Did somebody have to twist your arm to do that?
Not hard. but give me the guy at the bottom.
Isaiah Simmons is on there as well. Yes.
He is a special player too, man. Joe was great, and certainly with Jefferson, man. I've seen him for so long because he played his high school football right up the road, from me at Destrehan High School, and just a tremendous player. And what he did, you talk about a guy that squeezed all the vitamin C out the orange, man. Justin did it, and he is one heck of a football player. I couldn't be more thrilled for him. But 3 guys that I think will make big impacts in the NFL.
You can, of course, get to MikeDetillier.com, and you can order your M&D draft report. It'll be sent out here hopefully shortly. Mike, Tua. Let's go to Tua real quick. Says he's 100%. This is a tough one for GMs, right? I mean, it's got to be. What are they weighing right now? Teams that would be interested in Tua. How do you come to a decision on what to do?
You're weighing your job, good or bad, with Tua. If you're a GM and a head coach, and you hang your hat with him, and injury-wise something happens, or it's not as good as you might think it is, it's going to cost you your job. The owner's not going to understand. If it works out, you might be playing on Super Bowl Sunday one day, because I think he's such a great talent as a player. I wouldn't have an issue if my medical staff cleared him. I would not have an issue picking him. And what I think will happen is Burrow goes 1, and then Chase Young goes 2 to Washington, because I think Washington's already tipped their hand. When they went trade for Kyle Allen, I think they took any leverage. Now, with someone else after Kyle Allen, that part I don't know. But they tipped things, because I do think that would have been an opportunity for somebody to blink real hard and try to get to the 2 spot for Tua. Now, I think that's all kind of done, and you can see that the Redskins are going to go Chase Young. The spot everybody's going to want to hit is 3 with the Lions. The Lions have everything kind of in their pockets. Do you take him knowing that next year Matt Stafford's not going to be on that team one way or another, and neither will Matt Patricia, because I don't see how he can dig himself out of the hole that they're in. Do you pick him as a futures pick, understanding you might have to sit with him for a year and then he becomes the starter? Or do you trade that pick off? Somebody blinking at that point. We all know the Dolphins really want Joe Burrow. I think it would take a Godfather offer. And I just think, Mike Brown is so hard-headed. It's going to really take a great offer to get him to change his mind. If not, will the Dolphins be that team? Would the LA Chargers be that team to move up? I don't see Detroit wanting to move any farther down than that. So I think the 3 spot becomes where Tua gets selected. It just depends on which team makes that move to do it.
Now, Sean Payton earlier this week, Mike, also said that they're going to have to carry a 3rd quarterback. I mean, I think everyone understands that at this point. If you don't, well, you're not watching. So
you're not listening.
Exactly. So what do they do, Mike? Let's walk through some of the options in free agency.
Go for a veteran.
And so free agent. And so you're not going draft for your 3rd, because if you go veteran, Mike, then you're not going to draft a quarterback, right? Because you're not going to keep a 4th, and you're not going to put him on the practice squad and risk someone signing him away.
Okay, just think about it. You are all chips in, right? You just spent a lot of money on a 32-year-old safety and a 33-year-old receiver. Are you going to put that 21-year-old quarterback in there if something happens to Taysom Hill and something happens to Drew? Come on, you're going to go with the veteran. That's common sense. That doesn't take a lot of thinking to figure it out. Now, will this play out where Sean's thinking and organization's thinking is, let's wait till after the draft, and then we make a move after a veteran quarterback? Because there are a few of them out there, and guys that have played before. If I'm a veteran quarterback and I don't have a lot of options, And I think about what happened with Teddy Bridgewater, and in a 6-game spread, what he did for himself. Just think about that. What he did to get the type of contract he's got and a starter's role in Carolina. And under the tutelage of Sean Payton and working with Drew. I think all of that works to the Saints' favor to go after a veteran quarterback. And again, one of the guys I think will end up signing between now and the draft. But there's still a couple of guys out there that you got to seriously think about. If something happens to Taysom, do I want my backup to be a 22-year-old rookie quarterback?
Nope.
Not me. I'm not taking that chance.
Same.
I'm not doing it. I'm going to go with the veteran who's been there, done that. And, he's got some weapons around him that are pretty good. So I do think that they're going to go the veteran route for the backup, for the number 3 guy. It makes all the sense in the world, and you are going to be on the active roster each week, knowing that, Taysom plays a number of other roles for the Saints.
He's on Twitter at Mike Detillier with us every Thursday. The other news today, Mike, is P.J. Williams re-signing with the Saints. I had some thoughts, talked about it last hour. Let me just start it open-ended. Your thoughts on the Saints bringing back P.J.?
I really thought P.J. played pretty well last year, especially when they put him at the free safety position when the Saints got kind of beat up there. So now he's versatile. He can play in the nickel. It's not costing you a ton of money. And he can also play safety and play on special teams. So where are you going to find – okay, everybody wants Superman to fly in to save the day at corner. There is no veteran out there like that. There is no veteran. I still think that this draft may come down to 2 LSU players in round 1. Patrick Queen, Kristian Fulton.
For the Saints.
For the Saints.
Huh.
Think about it. I mean, when you look at it, now I would include Jefferson, but I think he'll be gone by then.
I agree.
I think he'll be gone by then. Not by much, but I think he'll be gone by that time. Sean sort of sidestepped it a little bit, we're looking at interior offensive linemen, and it's the deep core receivers, and looking at the kicking game. He didn't mean punter or kicker, but he meant guys that can play on special teams. And this is the time of year where you find out about people like that can help you on special teams. And then, what he said at the end. Yeah, linebackers, we're going to take a long look at that, and we're going to keep a close eye on the cornerback situation. You look at what could be there at 24, it could be a choice. And it's unusual because the Saints haven't been in this spot where you got 2 LSU guys or maybe 1 LSU guy. That's obvious. But I do think Patrick Queen and Kristian Fulton are going to come into play with the Saints pick in round 1. They would fill needs, and I still believe this football team needs to add a young, talented linebacker that can be versatile, like Patrick could, or Kenneth Murray from Oklahoma, or to get that cover corner, that guy that can match up. And Fulton's done a really good job in that spot, really good. And everybody's got a different opinion on cornerbacks 3, 4, 5. Everybody's pretty much in agreement. Okudah and C.J. Henderson are going to be 1, 2. After that, everybody's got their little favorites. Some people like A.J. Terrell. My thing is, you better not put that LSU game tape on if you're waving that flag for Terrell. Now, everybody has a bad game, but that one wasn't a good one for him. He got spun around like a top a number of times. You look at Fulton, I think he would certainly be somebody at 24, or even if you traded down a little bit, depending on how you felt, has to come into play for the Saints. So, again, there is no Superman cornerback veteran that's going to come swooping in and save the day for you. And so, it makes a lot of sense to bring P.J. back. And he's not costing you a ton of money. If you're going to get the Superman or the starting corner, it's going to be via the draft.
Mike, Nick Saban's the latest to float the idea of an OTA-like scenario for college football if they get back onto campus, let's say by July 1st. Thoughts on something like that, or what a best-case scenario would be for the college football, to make up for the lack of spring practice?
No question. I'm all for it. And listen, that even before this happened, there was some push for some summer sessions of OTAs, and you can understand it, especially if you Nick, or what's happening with Ed at LSU, or you're a team like Ohio State. When you lose so many guys early to the NFL, to have that time to work with them, now you basically that's lost, unless you can get them all together to kind of work on their own. But that's just going to be a short group, and so we're living in a different world today, and I'm all for it. And I'll be honest with you, I'm all for it even before the coronavirus situation. I just think that they do it under supervised situations, and again, what does it hurt? Give me the negative of it.
I mean, Mike, especially since guys are on campus working out with the strength and conditioning staff. No one's saying add padded practices, but what's the harm in going do a 45-minute, like what Ogeron does on Monday, the shells, just a quick tempo practice just to get reps and go. Like, I have no problem with that at all.
Okay, you don't get to go because you're doing a show, but a lot of times Saints practices, you go there. They only in pads and hitting one day out the week.
Mm-hmm.
Everything else is shells. So, I mean, if you go to watch, again, I've used that term, it's pajamas and slippers. I mean, so you're getting in work on timing and technique and that sort of thing, but it's not you live drills and stuff like that. But if you go to an NFL training camp, you're not seeing a lot of live drills either as far as hitting's concerned.
Yeah.
Man, that's those days are past, and you're not seeing that again anymore. For the protection of the athlete, for everything else that's involved, you're not seeing that anymore. Is it good and bad? You can argue that point about it. But talking about the OTAs, what you're looking at is guys on campus working together, supervised, and you're not hitting. You're just working on drills, working on timing. And I do think with the major colleges, like in Alabama, like in LSU, USC, Ohio State, you name it, they lose so many guys early to the NFL. Those young guys getting in that extra work helps them. I'm all for it. I do not see a negative with it.
What would that look like, Mike? I mean, if you had to, and I'm asking you on the spot here, but if you had to map it out, would it be number of practices, how often, kind of how would that look?
If you're there all summer, I would think twice a week in a probably 4-week span.
Twice a week in a 4-week span, so eight practices. Over basically over the month of July, and then you could start camp as you normally would in August.
Right, and so you could do it on a Monday and a Thursday, or a Tuesday and a Thursday, whatever. You're not talking about doing these every day. It's not like a training camp. But the OTA part of doing it over a 4-week span, couple times a week, that's what I would go for, because I think that makes all the sense in the world. Some of these guys are still in school, too, still going to class or taking classes. So that you got to take into consideration, too. But I would be all for 2 practices, 4 times in a week span. So you would have those 8 practice sessions in a month, in 4 weeks.
Mm-hmm.
Again, I think that would be helpful, especially to the younger players, to try to get down the timing, to work with a quarterback, get their technical skills down, especially if you're a young offensive or defensive lineman. That sort of thing, I think, would do a lot of good, especially when you have that amount of attrition that goes on at some of these schools when you lose 8-10 guys every year to the NFL. It not only affects your starters, it also affects your depth. That's the big part. I remember years back Coach Miles making a comment and talking to him about losing guys early to the NFL. And one of the few times he hit he really got the bat on the ball here. He was like, it not only affects us starter wise. He said, really, where it takes its toll when you lose someone early to the NFL is that younger player now has to step up. And he said, sometimes we're talking about two younger players. So it's affecting really your depth across the board. That's where you could get those practice sessions in, and I think it certainly would help.
Mike, two more things in this segment. We'll break and we'll get to listener questions. One, the SEC did allow for virtual meetings, and we had Sam Pittman on with us in hour one, and he said that he's expecting next week the league's going to expand it from 2 hours to 4. So what practically and functionally do you think these teams can, like, is it enough, Mike? Like, what can they really get done in these virtual meetings?
Well, that's pretty much aren't how we live our lives today. We're doing shows that way. Every once in a while you can do something from the studios, but this is how we sort of live in our life, and may live our life for the next certainly for the next couple months. I think it's certainly helpful in getting some of the terminology down, understanding plays a little bit better, and I do think that to get that across, the mental part of it is so important in this game. Understanding what you have to do on every play, not every once in a while, but every play. That mental muscle that you have to use to play this game. You can be talented, but if you don't know what to do and where you're supposed to be, you got issues. That's where these, I think, virtual meetings come into play, where you can have a coach show you this is where you're supposed to be on this play. And if we call this particular audible, this is where you're supposed to do. It's not like being on the field, but it's the closest thing you can get to it at this point.
Mm-hmm.
And when will this be done? We're hopeful. Right. We're hopeful in maybe in 4 or 5 weeks, maybe 6 weeks. But there's no guarantee of that. So I think for coaches, I understand that you want to try to get this across mentally to your player because you can't work with them physically.
He's on Twitter at Mike Detillier, SaintsReport.com, MikeDetillier.com, the M&D Draft Report as well. We got one segment to go with Mike D. Mike, before we hit this last break, come back and get to listener questions, I wanted to float this to you because we're obviously talking about missing spring practice, but as far as the draft, a lot of guys are missing their pro day opportunities, which would have been happening here in the last week or so. Of the LSU guys that are going into the draft, who, one or two, a couple guys maybe, would you pinpoint as missing the biggest opportunity and not
Delpit,
having a pro day?
It's not even a question. It's Grant. Because of the fact he had injuries, the shoulder and the ankle, did not run at the combine, still rehabbing. He's a guy that it's going to affect him. And in my draft book, I do not have him as a first-round pick. That ran in my mind at the end of round 1, that I think maybe the question marks about him physically, and I think the question mark is, which one am I getting? The dominant guy of 2018 or the guy in 2019 who missed a lot of open field tackles that seemed to be going for the ankles and not trying to make the tackle? And I get the injury part, but is he fully healthy? So if you're going to use that first-round pick on a guy, I think it's going to affect Grant more than anyone early on. Now, Tua certainly, he's in a league of his own in that area, but I do think it's going to negatively affect Grant. I still think he'll be a top 40 pick in the draft, but he may be a second-round pick instead of going, say, from 20 to 32 in round 1. That opportunity not to work out is going to cost him. I don't think there's any question about it.
First, let's go to Twitter, Mike. Here's Mark, who says, ask Mike, what second or third tier quarterback fits the Saints' long-term plans in the upcoming draft? Anybody you like, Mike, middle rounds?
I don't know about middle rounds, but I'd like Jalen Hurts on this team.
Oh, really? Okay, that's interesting.
I really think that now listen, I don't know if he's not going to get there when the Saints pick in round 3. But if the Saints would make any maneuver for a young quarterback, I think it would be for Jalen. I think we're seeing a changing NFL. I think Sean could do a lot of good with him from a standpoint of utilizing his skills. And this was a guy who was the SEC Player of the Year, the Big 12 Player of the Year. Great leader.
Yeah.
He's got the arm. He's inconsistent, and there are some balance issues with him. And I saw that even at the Manning camp, where Peyton and Eli working with him with his footwork and his balance. And I think that's something Sean could work on. I like Jalen Hurts a lot better than most people. I really do. I think he's a guy that's got a chance. Now, he won't be a first-round pick. I think, though, later in round 2, he's the type of individual that somebody's going to take a shot at. And in saying that, too, Matt, I think he would be a guy that I would have a lot of interest in. Also, to today, I got to pass my condolences on to the family and friends of Wayne Reese. Long-time New Orleans coach here. He coached at McDonough 35, Carver High School, also at Washington Marion, who passed away of the coronavirus complications. This is the third individual that I know of in less than 5 days that have passed away. Wayne was such a terrific coach, great mentor to people, and he had one of the best lines about me that I think I've ever heard. I'm talking to somebody in another room. He does not see me, and as he passes, he flips the light out, and he passes by the door, and he says, "You know, Mike, you're one of the few guys in this world that if you was in a dark room and I didn't see you but I heard you, I know who you are."
Mike, that's really damn true. That is really true.
So God bless the family with Coach Reese, and he was involved so much, especially in New Orleans and sports and coaching football. Also was at one time Marshall Faulk's head coach.
Makes sense.
So Wayne had a big impact on a lot of people. God bless him.
Well said, Mike. Stephen Walzak asked Mike, how much does the Thad Moss injury affect his draft stock?
I think very little. I think that's an injury that you can come back from. Now everybody said, well, he's going to miss time. What time? The NFL ain't fixing to crank them doors open anytime soon.
That's true.
So, I mean, you might say that, and in regular times he might, but I don't think it's going to affect him. Somebody's going to fall in love with him. And you know who tipped a little bit about him was Andy Reid. He made a comment when they were interviewing him after the Super Bowl about, hey, Randy, I really love your son. He'd be a great fit for us. In essence, Andy's telling him, hey,
I remember.
Look, there ain't a lot of coaches that say that, and outwardly would say it, but, Andy really don't care what you think about him or what you don't. And so I would look again. I've got him ranked as a 4th-round pick. I do not think the foot injury is going to affect him, just like I don't think it's going to affect Van Jefferson, who has a similar injury, the wide receiver from University of Florida.
David Hawes asked Mike if the Saints draft priorities changed with all the quarterback shuffling going around.
That's a really good question, and I'm going to answer yes.
Okay.
I do think that one of the things a lot of people said, when Sean made that comment about all the speed, with San Francisco and Kansas City, he's got all the speed. And he was talking about offense. You know what he was also talking about? Defending that offense. Okay, everybody jumped on it. That's all he was. He was just talking about offensive speed. I think he was also talking about, you know what? I got to stop those guys too. So I do think now with Brady and understanding you're going to have to play him twice a year, and you're going to have to play Matt Ryan twice a year. Carolina, listen, they're rebuilding, and we understand that. I do think with a lot of shuffling here, it's going to place a little bit more priority on the defensive side of football and big men as you get from picks 18 to 32 in round 1. I think that's where it's going to make a big difference. Teams sort of jockeying around a little bit that, okay, I know I can put points on the board, but I got to stop them. So either give me a pass rusher, give me a linebacker, give me a defensive back. I can get that receiver maybe a little bit later down in the draft.
William Ivey asked Mike, do the Patriots use their stockpile of draft picks to move up to get a top quarterback after Burrow?
I doubt it.
Okay.
It's never been Bill's way of doing it, and I think Bill's telling you, I am going to ride that Jarrett Stidham horse until he throws me off. I think he is convinced himself that Stidham's his guy down the road. He brought in Hoyer as the backup, and I think that's what he's going to do. He's going to go with Jarrett. And man, with all the holes he's got at wide receiver, at tight end, outside linebacker, defensive tackle, man, it was easy to fill in them spots for the Patriots. When I did the mock draft, I just kind of crossed it off because they had so many areas that they could use help in because of what they lost in free agency.
See if we can get about a minute, Mike. Let's see. Ask Mike, could the Saints trade back into round one to get both LSU players?
Man, trade back, in essence, giving up a pick for next year.
You'd have to, especially without having a second rounder this year.
I wouldn't put anything past Sean. One thing with Sean, man, I had somebody tell me he's not aggressive enough. What? Man, he might be too aggressive, but he ain't never non-aggressive. I wouldn't be surprised this team trade back in round one. They've not done it. That's not been their forte. But I wouldn't be surprised to collect extra picks in a draft that he knows it's got a lot of good talent in rounds 2, 3, and 4, and he doesn't have a second-round pick.
Last one is 20 seconds, Mike. Is wide receiver off the board for the Saints in round one?
No, absolutely not.